Imagine waking up in complete darkness. You are lying down, cannot move much, and when you reach up, your hands hit wood just inches from your face. You are in a coffin, underground, and you are very much alive. This was the Victorian era's worst nightmare. Not ghosts, not disease, not even poverty. Being buried alive. They were so terrified of this happening that they invented elaborate coffins with bells, tubes, and escape hatches. Some cities even built special buildings where they would simply watch bodies for days to make sure the person was actually gone. The weird part is, despite all that effort and engineering, there is not a single verified case of one of these devices actually saving anyone. So let us talk about why Victorians were so afraid of being buried alive, what they did about it, and why none of it worked. The Victorian obsession with premature burial was not just paranoia. They had legitimate reasons to be scared. Before modern medicine, there was no reliable way to confirm that someone had actually died. There were no stethoscopes to detect faint heartbeats, no EKG machines, and no brain activity monitors. Doctors basically checked whether a person was breathing, felt for a pulse, and if they could not find either, the person was declared gone. The problem was that many conditions could make someone look dead when they were not. Cholera was a massive issue in the 18th and 19th centuries, and it could leave victims in comas that looked exactly like death. Catalepsy, a condition that causes temporary paralysis and dramatically slowed breathing, could do the same. Severe hypothermia could mimic death. Drug overdoses could as well. All of these could make someone appear gone to a Victorian doctor with very limited diagnostic tools. And we are not talking about theoretical cases. In 1905, a man named William Tebb published a collection of documented cases. 219 near live burials were caught just in time. 149 actual live burials happened. 10 people were dissected while still alive, and 2 people woke up during their own embalming. Now, were all of these verified? Probably not. But even if half were exaggerated, that is still genuinely horrifying. This fear even had a name: taphophobia. The name comes from the Greek words taphos, meaning grave, and phobos, meaning fear. It affected everyone, including famous people. George Washington's last instructions were, "Do not let my body be put into the vault in less than 3 days after I am gone." Frédéric Chopin asked that his friends swear to have him cut open if necessary, so that he would not be buried alive. Alfred Nobel, the founder of the Nobel Prize, wanted his arteries severed before cremation just to be absolutely sure he had passed. Hans Christian Andersen kept a note by his bedside saying he only seemed gone, just in case he collapsed and could not communicate. These were brilliant, accomplished people, and they were genuinely terrified. So what did the Victorians do about it? If there is one thing the Victorian era loved, it was over-engineering solutions to problems. And the safety coffin industry did not disappoint. The first recorded safety coffin was built in 1792 for Duke Ferdinand of Brunswick. It was a pretty straightforward design, with a window to let light in, an air tube for fresh air, and instead of nailing the lid shut, they used a lock. They even sewed 2 keys into his burial shroud so he could let himself out. Thoughtful. But things got way more elaborate from there. In 1829, Dr. Johann Gottfried Taberger designed a system with ropes attached to the person's hands, feet, and head. These ropes connected to a bell above ground. The idea was that a cemetery watchman would patrol, listening for bells. If one rang, they could insert an AIR tube and start pumping fresh air down while they dug you up. That is, assuming the person had not already suffocated. Christian Eisenbrandt took a different approach in 1843. His life-preserving coffin had a spring-loaded lid that would pop open at the slightest movement. It was a clever idea, but completely useless once you were buried under 6 feet of dirt. The lid could spring open against solid earth. Congratulations, you were still trapped. Franz Wester's 1868 design was more practical. It included a viewing tube so a watchman could actually see a face to verify movement, a ladder for climbing out, and a bell system. He also addressed the decomposition problem. The tube let the watchman check whether motion was real or just gases shifting the body. By 1885, Charles Sieber and Frederick Borntrager added more modern technology: battery-powered alarms, fans for airflow, flags that would rise above ground, and lamps for viewing. The systems were becoming seriously complicated. The most elaborate was Count Michel de Carnis-Carnicki's invention of 1897, called Le Carnis. It could detect movement, automatically open an air tube, raise a flag, and ring a bell. One volunteer stayed buried in it for 9 days to prove it worked. At an official demonstration, the signaling system malfunctioned. The volunteer was only saved because the breathing tube still worked and an assistant pulled him out manually. Even the most advanced safety coffin nearly ended the person it was supposed to save. Germany alone had over 30 patents for safety coffins. The United States had 22 between 1868 and 1925. And the darkest joke is that many designs forgot to include adequate air supply. So even if you woke up and successfully rang a bell, you could still suffocate before anyone could dig you up. All these elaborate designs, all this engineering, all these patents. And the success rate? 0. Not a single documented case of anyone being saved by a safety coffin. Not one. The main problem was decomposition. When bodies decompose, they produce gases. These gases cause the body to swell and shift. Limbs move, fingers twitch, and every single time that happened, the bells would ring. Imagine being the cemetery watchman. You are walking through a graveyard at night, and you hear bells. Lots of bells. Decomposing bodies are triggering them constantly. After a while, you would stop responding. You would have to, or you would be digging up graves every single night, only to find they had been empty the whole time. The whole system defeated itself. Some cities took a different approach. They built waiting mortuaries called Leichenhaus in Germany. Instead of burying people immediately, they placed bodies in special buildings on zinc trays. The bodies were kept warm, counterintuitively, to speed up decomposition, because putrefaction was the only 100% reliable sign that someone was actually gone. They still attached bells to the fingers, and attendants watched around the clock for any movement. Munich had 10 of these by 1907. They became tourist attractions. Mark Twain visited one in 1879 and wrote about it. These were not grim, depressing buildings either. They had marble facades and elaborate architecture. Wealthy families could rent private chambers for their deceased relatives. The downside? They reeked of flowers and disinfectants because they were storing decomposing bodies. But at least they did not smell like the Paris morgues, which were apparently genuinely horrifying. Cities across Europe built them. Frankfurt, Berlin, Copenhagen, Prague, Lisbon, Amsterdam, Brussels, all with the same basic idea: wait until there is absolutely no doubt the person has passed before burying them. And the success rate? Between 1822 and 1845, Munich's waiting mortuaries processed 465,000 bodies. Number found still alive? 0. It was the same problem as the coffin bells. The bells would sometimes ring from decomposition gases, but nobody was actually waking up. Quick side note, you've probably heard the phrase "saved by the bell" and assumed it came from these coffin bells. It did not. This is one of those fake etymology stories that sounds plausible, but it is completely wrong. The phrase "saved by the bell" comes from boxing. It first appeared in print in February 1893 in a Massachusetts newspaper, referring to a boxer who was saved from being knocked out when the round-ending bell rang. Same with dead ringer. That phrase comes from horse racing, not coffin bells. And graveyard shift just means a spooky night shift. It has nothing to do with watching graves. The coffin bell story is far more interesting than the truth, so it persists, but it is not real. The fear of premature burial was not just about coffins and bells. It influenced Victorian culture deeply. Edgar Allan Poe wrote several stories about the fear, including The Premature Burial, The Fall of the House of Usher, and The Cask of Amontillado. Those stories became popular because they tapped into a genuine cultural terror. Newspapers printed lurid accounts of bodies being exhumed with evidence of struggle, such as scratches inside coffin lids, torn fingernails, and bodies found in twisted positions. Were those stories true? Maybe some of them, but they fed the fear. They created a market for safety coffins, and those coffins did not work, so the fear continued. The fear has not completely gone away. Taphophobia is still a recognized phobia today. In 1995, an Italian inventor patented a coffin with an emergency alarm, intercom, torch, breathing apparatus, and heart monitor. In 1927, a South African businessman was buried with a working telephone. The difference is that modern medicine has made premature burial essentially impossible. We can detect brain activity, measure oxygen levels, and monitor heart function at levels the Victorians could not imagine. The fear persists, but the actual risk is gone. So why did Victorians put bells on their coffins? Because they were terrified of being buried alive and did not have the medical technology to reliably confirm someone had passed. The bell seemed like a simple solution, but bodies move as they decompose. Every safety coffin became a source of false alarms, ringing for people who could not hear them. The Victorians were terrified of the wrong thing. They should have been more worried about cholera and contaminated water. Instead, they spent energy on elaborate coffins that never saved anyone. To learn how knights use the bathroom in full armor, watch the video you now see on your screen. Thank you.